Secretary of State Tillerson huddled with world leaders at the G7 summit in Italy for an urgent meeting on Syria. Italy's foreign minister says they all couldn't agree on whether Russia deserves new sanctions for its support of Syria's government.
It was Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson who was really pushing for those sanctions.
After last week's alleged chemical attack, Syria is top of the bill for this G7 summit. Foreign ministers from the group want to agree on a common response which may include sanctions against Russia. And it comes just days before one of their members, the US Secretary of State, heads to Moscow for a meeting with his Russian counterpart.
What we're trying to do is to give Rex Tillerson the clearest possible mandate from us as the West, the UK, all our allies here, to say to the Russians, this is your choice. Stick with that guy, stick with that tyrant, or work with us to find a better solution.
The Allies will also look to use the talks to get a clearer grasp of US policy towards Syria. Last week's US missile strikes against a Syrian airbase in retaliation for the alleged chemical attack suggested a tough approach to Assad. This was also implied by Tillerson during a visit to the site of a Nazi World War II atrocity on Monday.
And we rededicate ourselves to holding to account any and all who commit crimes against the innocents anywhere in the world.
But Tillerson has also said in the past week that defeating the Islamic State group remains Washington's priority in the Middle East. And whatever the agreement the G7 group reach on dealing with Russian support for Assad, history will be against them. UN efforts at peace haven't worked for the past 6 years of the civil war, and Russia has shown no sign that its position will change anytime soon.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on his way to Moscow for his first high-level talks in Russia.
I think it's also worth thinking about Russia has really aligned itself with the Assad regime, the Iranians, and Hezbollah. Is that a long-term alliance that serves Russia's interest? Or would Russia prefer to realign with the United States, with other Western countries and Middle East countries who are seeking to resolve the Syrian crisis? We want to relieve the suffering of the Syrian people. We want to create a future for Syria that is stable and secure. And so Russia can be a part of that future and play an important role. Or Russia can maintain its alliance with this group, which we believe is not going to serve Russia's interest longer term. But only Russia can answer that question.
In the last half an hour or so, the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, has been holding a press conference where he has said that he will appeal to the United Nations to investigate last week's chemical attack in Syria.
Well, that's right. Vladimir Putin was speaking at a press conference following his talks with Italian President Sergio Mattarella, who's in Moscow to speak to Vladimir Putin. And he was asked a question on Syria. And Vladimir Putin said that what is happening in Syria now reminds him of what was happening in Iraq in 2003 in a situation with chemical weapons there. According to Vladimir Putin said that situation led to the destruction of the country of Iraq and the creation of Daesh. And Vladimir Putin said that the same is happening now in Syria. And he said that he hopes for a positive trend in the situation. But he did say that apparently Moscow has information about what he called similar provocations, but by the US, which are being planned in other regions of Syria. And Vladimir Putin said that Moscow will be asking for an investigation at The Hague, and he said that any decisions must be based on the results of that investigation.
And it's interesting because the US Secretary of State, Tillerson, is just hours away from arriving in Russia. I wonder what these comments mean for that meeting between Putin and Tillerson.
That's right. So Rex Tillerson is indeed on his way. He should be landing in Moscow shortly this afternoon. And of course, it is going to be a very tough conversation. Tillerson is only due to speak with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at the moment. We don't know if the Kremlin will actually see Rex Tillerson for for talks with Vladimir Putin. That remains to be seen still. But of course, these conversations will be very difficult because, of course, Rex Tillerson had already said that Russia should distance itself from the Syrian government. However, we heard yesterday Interfax quoted Russia's, the Kremlin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov was saying that Russia will not abandon Bashar al-Assad for a Syria deal with the US. And Peskov also was quoted as saying that the Western leaders' calls for Assad to step down will have no prospects. So certainly Moscow is making its position clear, and indeed that conversation for Rex Tillerson will be quite a difficult one.
He was expected to announce his candidacy for the country's upcoming elections. Instead, Hassan Rouhani took to the podium to condemn US action against Syria for a second time.
The Syrians must give a response to the terrorists on the battlefield, one that sends a clear message to the Americans that terrorism will not be tolerated and their presence can't continue. The blows that will be dealt to the terrorists will make the US regret its actions.
The Iranian president over the weekend also called for an impartial probe into the suspected chemical attack in the war-torn country. A group that includes allies Moscow and Tehran had earlier released a statement warning Washington against further military actions.
The United States crossed red lines by attacking Syria. From now on, we will respond to anyone, including America, if it attacks Syria and crosses the red lines.
The Russians have announced a new attack sub, right? It was recently unveiled. What can it do? Well, according to the Russians, it can carry 300 torpedoes as well as have a missile capability. This is part of a whole suite of subs. It's going to be 6 or 7 subs that they're expecting within the next 4 or 5 years, possibly 6, that they'll be rolling out, and they'll be submerged under our oceans. They're calling them the black hole fleet, the black hole submarines, because they're so silent, they're impossible to detect. They just get lost out there in the ocean. So they're kind of suggesting that no one's going to be able to find them and figure out what they're up to out there. We need to put the fact that the Russians are revealing, doing a very big showy release, launch of this submarine, right, in the context of the messaging. It's sending a big message of they're modernizing and expanding their submarine fleet. There's been lots of reports for quite some time now that the Russians have been scaling up and doing a lot more patrolling around the world's oceans with submarines. And they've not just acknowledged, but they've stressed. They said, by the way, guess what? In 2016, we had already reached and surpassed Cold War levels of patrolling in the world's oceans. The new submarines, they're saying, can carry the Kalibr missile, which is another new missile that the Russians have introduced. A couple of years ago, they used these missiles. They said they used these missiles against Syria. We did see activity. We saw that they struck targets there, and they said they were the Kalibr missiles. If that's the case, Russia's saying that they have a range of about 1,500 miles. What does that mean to us? Well, it does mean that if submarines were sitting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, they clearly could strike things on U.S. soil. From, say miles off of shore, you could reach Topeka, Kansas, you could reach Denver, theoretically, with that kind of missile reach.
Pyongyang has criticized the United States after President Trump ordered a US Navy battle group to deploy in waters off the Korean peninsula. North Korea warned of catastrophic consequences if Washington continued its provocation. On the streets of the capital, people reacted to the increased tensions. We're not scared, we love peace, but we are never going to beg for it. If anyone tries to provoke us, we'll defend ourselves in the strongest way with our own power, and we will keep doing things our way. The US doesn't care about rocket tests of its allies like the puppets in South Korea and the Japanese reactionaries do them. I think that the US has no reason to complain about what our military does for self-defense. In South Korea, the country has been intensifying its military readiness for an attack by the North. The South Korean capital, Seoul, is home to 10 million residents and within easy reach of North Korean missile batteries.
Tension builds in the region as North Korea reacts angrily to the return of the Nimitz-class supercarrier. All the more reason for Seoul, Washington to continue joint military drills, including the largest ever logistics exercise. Kwon Jang-ho gets us better acquainted with Operation Pacific Reach.
Wet conditions and choppy seas pound the coast of South Korea's southeastern port city of Pohang. And 400 meters off the shore is stationed a floating platform with a bridge leading up to it. It's a temporary wharf that can be set up in a day and a half and promptly connected to land within 2 hours. This makeshift facility has been conceived as a countermeasure in the case of North Korea destroying an operational port. It can withstand 2-meter-high waves and carry armored vehicles weighing up to 100 tons. A pipe is also connected from 16 kilometers away to stock fuel.
By deploying supplies and equipment in a timely manner, it can contribute to the theater of operations and ensure victory in a war.
This is part of the largest ever South Korea-US joint military logistics drill called Operation Pacific Reach that began on Monday. Amid rising tensions on the Korean peninsula, 1,200 South Korean soldiers and 2,500 US troops have been mobilized to take part in these exercises, along with some 150 vehicles and 400 tons of transported supplies. The drills, defensive in nature, are also aimed at preparing the military to assist in disaster relief efforts and humanitarian emergencies around the world. The exercises are scheduled to carry on until April 21st.
There's little left of the Grand Sainte migrant camp after a fire ravaged through half of it, sending plumes of smoke into the sky that could be seen from kilometers away. In a matter of minutes, migrants here lost what little possessions they had.
We don't know what he wants to do now. We lost everything. We just get out safety. We need safety and we get out.
The campsite in Dunkirk in northern France was set up by Doctors Without Borders last year. After the nearby Calais migrant camp was dismantled, the population here increased to 1,500 people, and local authorities say tensions were growing over living conditions. Shortly before the fire, riot police were sent to break up a fight involving over 100 Kurdish and Afghan migrants.
This is fighting today between Kurd people and Afghanistan people. We don't know exactly for what they fight, but it's just as you look what happened today. And we are refugees here in France. We don't have any place. I lost all my documents. I have only this paper that says that I'm refugees now here in France.
Migrants have now been moved to nearby gyms pending their relocation. Authorities announced last month that they were planning to dismantle the camp due to growing violence.
Security forces have been struggling to regain control of Lebanon's largest Palestinian refugee camp, but the number of dead and injured continues to rise. The unrest began on Friday after Palestinian factions, including Fatah, which is led by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, ordered an armed group in the Ain el-Helwe camp in Sidon to hand themselves over. The group's leader, Bilal Badr, is described by Palestinian and Lebanese authorities as an Islamic militant. There was a brief ceasefire, but that collapsed earlier on Monday. This is not the first time Palestinian security forces have taken on the armed groups which infiltrate the camps. The Lebanese authorities say these streets are used to shelter fugitives. But under an agreement with the Fatah-dominated Palestine Liberation Organization, Lebanon's security forces are not allowed into the camp. Lebanese security forces have closed many of the roads leading to the camp. A nearby government hospital was also briefly shut when it was struck by a rocket.
Bu mahallede AKP, MHP herhangi bir faşist programda bulunursa cezalandırılacaktır. Mahallemizde faşist AKP'nin çalışmalarına, propagandalarına geçip vermeyiz.
secure are your WhatsApp chats? But whatever the answer, government officials are seeking to weaken the privacy strength of the Messenger platform further. Just take a listen to what one Swedish MEP had to say after last Friday's attack in Stockholm.
If WhatsApp continues to refuse police access to encrypted communication, people will get really angry, including me. If they don't take action now, they are protecting the terrorists. No normal human being wants to do this. This is the second time in weeks that this has happened. The WhatsApp leadership needs to sit down and think seriously. Do they want to help terrorists or help the police? WhatsApp must reconsider. They surely don't want to be known as the terrorist social communication platform.
Well, we are seeing increasing demands from authorities for access to WhatsApp users' communications, specifically when terrorism is suspected. And it's not only Swedish officials who are calling on the company to reconsider its encryption policy. The Messenger service was also slammed by the UK's Home Secretary after the Westminster terror attack last month.
There should be no place for terrorists to hide. We need to make sure that organisations like WhatsApp, and there are plenty of others like that, don't provide a secret place for terrorists to communicate with each other. They have a responsibility to engage with government, to engage with law enforcement agencies when there is a terrorist situation. They cannot get away with saying we are a different situation. They are not. We need to make sure that our intelligence services have the ability to get into situations like encrypted WhatsApp.
The man behind the carnage in London, Khalid Masood, is said to have sent messages via WhatsApp minutes prior to the atrocity. However, there are voices saying that governments are simply trying to use the situation to their advantage to extend their powers.
Guys, my God, what are you doing?
A middle-aged Asian man can be seen being forcibly removed from his seat and dragged across the aisle by 3 security officials.
Just kill me. Just kill me.
Blood streaking down his face. Shocked eyewitnesses immediately took to Twitter, igniting a firestorm. Outraged customers vowed to delete their United accounts and called on others to boycott the airline. United's CEO issued an apology, but said that while he regretted the incident, he stood behind the airline staff.
While I deeply regret this situation arose, I also emphatically stand behind all employees. I do, however, believe that there are lessons that we can learn from this experience. Treating our customers and each other with respect and dignity is at the core of who we are, and we must always remember this, no matter how challenging the situation.
Other airlines, meanwhile, have latched onto the event as a marketing opportunity, like this new slogan from Southwest. United Airlines has still been recovering from a separate backlash that put its treatment of customers into question last month, when 2 teens were denied boarding a flight for wearing leggings.
Police in California have identified the gunman who shot dead a teacher and wounded 2 pupils, one of them fatally. He's been named as 53-year-old Cedric Anderson, who had gained entry into the school as a visitor and kept his weapon concealed until he opened fire in the classroom where 15 children with special needs were being taught. The teacher was his estranged wife.
Cedric entered the classroom and, from what we understand, without saying anything, armed with a large caliber revolver, opened fire on his wife. She was killed in that exchange. There are 2 students in the classroom that were behind the teacher that were struck by gunfire. One of those children is identified as Jonathan Martinez. Tragically, he has passed away.
The police chief went on to say the shooting at North Park Elementary School in San Bernardino was an apparent murder-suicide. The same city made national headlines in 2015 when a couple, said to have been inspired by Islamic extremism, killed 14 people at an office party.
The new law means every child in New Mexico will be served breakfast and lunch, even if their parents have not paid. The first of its kind legislation outlawing lunchtime shaming, where children are denied food or singled out for overdue bills.
They're angry or hurt or crying or because they have an unpaid lunch bill and it's your fault.
With among the highest poverty rates in the nation, New Mexico is not the only state where children have been embarrassed. In Alabama and Arizona, Kids were stamped at school with "I need lunch money." Some children have been forced to wear wristbands, while cafeteria workers in Pittsburgh and Omaha quit their jobs over no money, no meal policies.
School meal debt happens in every single district in the country, and it's just a humiliation that gets us nowhere. And in fact, I think is detrimental to a child's education, especially if they haven't been able to eat.
The so-called lunch bill directs schools to work more closely with parents to pay debts. In some cases, children were forced to mop cafeteria floors or clean tables in front of their friends before they could eat. California and Texas are now working on similar legislation, a new hunger to end lunchtime shaming for those with no appetite to single out children.
Well, a tough talking sheriff issuing a stern warning to drug dealers in his county in Florida.
To the dealers, I say, enjoy looking over your shoulder, constantly wondering if today's the day. We come for you. Enjoy trying to sleep tonight, wondering if tonight's the night our SWAT team blows your front door off the hinges. We are coming for you.
Wow. Sheriff Peyton Grinnell of Lake County, Florida, joins us right now live from Orlando. Sheriff, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, you've only been in office a couple of months. You swore that you would uphold the laws of Lake County, Florida in January. This was your first Facebook video. Are you surprised at the reaction this has gotten?
Yeah, when we made the video, I had no idea that it would reach this level. And I just wanted to reach out to our citizens in Lake County to let them know that I recognize that there was a problem, and to ask them for their help, to let them know that they could report anonymously to us where these drug dealers' houses are at, and here we are today.
Well, I think it's just that you're so direct. You just say, hey, drug dealers, our SWAT team's going to blow the hinges off your door. That gets a lot of attention.
It does, and you know, you can't negotiate with these drug dealers. They know what they're doing. They're pushing this poison out on our streets, and we need to take a tough stance on it, and that's what we're going to do.
Manila's police press corps drive to the scene of an extrajudicial killing. This man, an alleged drug user, is one of 8,000 casualties of President Duterte's drug war, which began last July. Adding to human rights concerns are allegations that Duterte ordered the killing of more than just drug criminals in his past role as mayor of Davao City. Guarded at a safe house, Arthur Las Cañas, a retired policeman and former member of the so-called Davao Death Squad, says he was paid $60,000 to take out June Pala, a media personality and opponent of Duterte.
So I accepted the contract for a hit job against June Pala. I got the bonus from Mayor Rudy Duterte personally at the residence of his girlfriend.
Las Cañas says it is the memory of his team killing the innocent family of a suspected kidnapper that drove him to testify to the Senate last month.
We stripped the body of all their clothing, and then we dumped it to this common grave, clothing the child, this pregnant woman. So it flashes back to my memory. It haunts me.
Despite the death toll of the drug war and a growing number of allegations of former criminality, Duterte remains popular, enjoying 83% approval ratings in the last quarter of 2016. Talk to people on the streets of Manila and they'll tell you they feel safer, and most attribute that to the president. Here at a Duterte rally in the capital, few had sympathy for the urban poor who have largely been the victims of the extrajudicial killings.
We love what our president is doing, because they are criminals and they are going to destroy our children, our grandchildren, and the future generation.
Well, Amnesty International reports there was a significant drop last year in the number of known executions around the world. They say 600 fewer people were killed in 2016 than the year before. Amnesty says 1,032 people were put to death. China executed more people than all other countries combined. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Pakistan were next in line. And for the first time in years, the U.S. was not among the top 5. Now, Americans executed 20 people in 2016.
The UN's refugee agency, the UNHCR, is warning of mass deaths from starvation across the Horn of Africa, Nigeria and Yemen. Now, it's raising the alarm because of a severe funding shortfall that they say could lead to an unavoidable humanitarian crisis. It says this could possibly be worse than starvation levels seen 5 years ago, when tens of thousands of people died from hunger. Well, famine's already been declared in South Sudan, where conflict and drought have led to mass hunger. But the UN says people in Nigeria, Somalia and Yemen are also starving to death. In all, around 20 million people are at risk of dying in the coming 6 months.